DOJ's first antitrust whistleblower reward signals a more aggressive approach to rooting out market allocation and procurement-related fraud, especially in digital marketplaces. With employees now financially incentivized to report before companies self-disclose, the competitive landscape for leniency has shifted. We'll explore how enforcement is changing with Ann O'Brien, partner at Shepherd and co-leader of the firm's Antitrust and Competition Practice Group. Ann, it is lovely to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me back.
It seems like it's been just yesterday, but it's been about 6 months since we talked about this new program from DOJ, a new whistleblower program. Before we get into the particulars about the news related to it, just kind of describe for me the shift in DOJ's posture over the last few years to really make whistleblower encouragement such an important part of their enforcement approach.
Yes, they are really focusing in the Department of Justice Antitrust Division on this whistleblower program. That is an evolution. I think for a long time in the Antitrust Division, when I was there as a prosecutor, there was the focus on the Antitrust Division's leniency program, self-disclosure program, as really a primary source for tips and leads. And there was a lot of discussion for years in the Department of Justice Antitrust Division about whether paying whistleblowers rather than relying on companies and individuals to come in and self-report was a good idea or not. And those who were not for it pointed out things like when someone is paid, they can be cross-examined on trial on that payment. You're a paid informant, and there's downsides to that. But I think we're at a point now where the Antitrust Division has seen leniency applications, self-disclosures dwindle a little bit, and they're looking for other tools. So, like we talked about in July, here comes the Whistleblower Rewards Program, and it's a program announced in July between the Antitrust Division and the U.S. Postal Service. And what they want to do is pay out antitrust whistleblowers who have evidence of antitrust crimes like bid rigging, price fixing, market allocation. They want to incentivize people, and it can just be regular people who have seen this type of conduct or those involved to come in and to report it to the Antitrust Division. And that's a tip and a source and lead for them to then go investigate and prosecute.
Well, at the end of January, they announced their first award under this program. What struck you as significant about this big announcement and this first award?
Yes, and when I was here back in July, I was skeptical about the program's memorandum of understanding that really was a little complex, as you pointed out, and had a lot of nuance to it and a lot of discretion. So I had a lot of unanswered questions about how quickly, how much money would be paid out, and the nexus to the Postal Service. So on January 29th, 2026, the DOJ's Antitrust Division and the Postal Service provided affirmative answers to a lot of my questions by announcing the first whistleblower reward. It was $1 million reward. It's a pretty significant amount of money to the whistleblower who provided information that led to a company, eBlock, to resolve criminal antitrust bid rigging and wire fraud charges through what they call a deferred prosecution agreement. And under that agreement, they agreed to pay $3.28 million criminal fine. And what they would do is pay that fine, and the whistleblower, they announced, was getting just $1 million, which is almost a third of that. So eBlock is a company that offers online car auction platforms, and so this was about bid rigging on those platforms. So why is this significant? I think 3 ways, and this really answers the questions I had. It was speedy, the amount was significant, and the underlying nexus was not too postally. I know that's not really a word, but let me explain what that means. On the speedy front, when I was here in July, I was skeptical that we'd see an actual payout of an award in under a year, but they beat it. In less than 7 months, the DOJ and the Postal went from rollout to payout, which is quick. I mean, as a 20-year Department of Justice veteran, I will tell you, in government years, that's light speed, right? I mean, things moved fast. So it's faster than we see in other whistleblower context, in the FCA, False Claims Act context, or other whistleblowers. It's fast. So the program did pay out quickly. The second is the whistleblower reward is significant. And it's not just $1 million being significant, because to an individual, we all know that is a large award. If you win it on a game show or if you're given it by the government, it's a lot. By all accounts, that's a big number. It's impressive, from an outsider's point of view, that the department so quickly paid out that amount. But it's not just the raw number. It's really, if you look at the math, because when I was here before, we talked about that the DOJ and the Postal Service, under the Memorandum of Understanding, said they would pay out 15 to 30% of the penalty. And they used an example where they laid out 20% payout. This is almost 30%. So the top end of that. Maybe they wanted to make a splash for the first person, I don't know. But I will say it's by all accounts significant, both math as a percentage of the penalty paid by the company, which is here a deferred prosecution, not a criminal prosecution and sentencing after trial, but it is almost 30% of that. So very significant, very fast. And then the third thing is, I had this question, and many of us did, about how much are they going to require that there is a nexus to the Postal Service. So you asked me about that, and I used an example of if the Postal Service is a direct victim. So contracts for water, for instance, that the Postal Service, workers are drinking when it was hot here in July, But this isn't that. The nexus is very thin, quite frankly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it says that they're ready to pay out these amounts. And it's really the discretion that was the question. And now we see that the Postal Service and the Antitrust Division are implementing the program and using their discretion towards paying it out. And I think that's significant and will incentivize people to think about reporting.
I'm speaking with Ann O'Brien. She's a partner at Shepherd and co-leader of the firm's Antitrust and Competition Practice Group. And there's a quote in the press release that announced this award that I want to get your reaction to. And it says, "Remember, the first company in an antitrust cartel that reports its collusion to the Antitrust Division might receive leniency, but the race is faster now because employees and their attorneys are incentivized to blow the whistle and beat their companies to the division's doorstep." What does that sound like to you?
Well, it's a good quote. And I think keeping the race on, I can see why they said it. It's well said in that part. As a longtime antitrust lawyer, there's a different part that jumps out to me, and that's the word might. And the reason that jumps out is because they say, if you're the first company in an antitrust cartel that reports its collusion to the Antitrust Division, you might receive leniency. But the race is faster now, and it goes on. The reason that might is significant is that there is this tension, as I said at the top of this portion, there is this tension between self-reporting, leniency, companies or individuals coming in to self-report without a payment, and incentivizing people to come in and report through the whistleblower program. And the Antitrust Division has been very clear that both can coexist, right? But this jumps out to me because I think it's a signaling of, we now have another source of information. And you, companies, are in a race with your own employees. You're in a race with potentially people at other companies that are going to come in and report. And if they report before you, maybe you don't get leniency. And there has been a trend and a tipping of this self-reporting leniency program, which has been wildly successful part of the Antitrust Division's criminal enforcement program, to be a little reticent, a little less likely to automatically give antitrust leniency when they didn't know of an offense before like they were. And I think there's a little signal of that. There's always been an individual leniency program since the early days of leniency. There was corporate leniency first and individual. So an employee could always come in and report. That race always existed in the leniency context. Now the difference is there's money tied to it. So they're focusing on that. So it's a different vehicle to get tips. And I think they're just like the Antitrust Division always did when I was there, saying this is a race to the prosecutor's door. This is adding a different aspect to the race. The race was always beat out your co-conspirator companies. If you're at a conspiratorial price-fixing meeting and one of your co-conspirators is an empty seat at the table, maybe they went in and reported. So you better be worried that they are, and talk to your lawyers, your in-house counsel, your compliance folks, and see if you should run in and report. If an individual potentially that worked for you complained about, hey, is this right what we're doing? You'd get nervous that maybe they'd run in and report. Now this is a different aspect. It just enhances that race because you might have a person that comes in, and the way they came out quickly with a large award, it does make it part of the discussion.
Do you think this splashy award is a way to kind of open the floodgates? Are we going to see a lot more of these? What do you think will be next from the DOJ and the Postal Service that will build on this first case?
Well, they certainly want to send that message, not just that quote in the press release that you said, but I've heard this week the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Antitrust Division, the person who said the quote that you just read, he's saying that there's a frenzy of applications from whistleblowers. This was very quick how it came about. There is questions in the antitrust bar about whether the Antitrust Division is proactively reaching out to whistleblowers, maybe with False Claims Act complaints or securities or other types of whistleblowers, and say, hey, do you know about antitrust stuff too? Is this there? Proactively doing that. There's nothing wrong with them doing that. But I think they want to create this idea that there is frenzy. And I mean, I'm not questioning it. They're saying it. There's a lot of applications. So I think they want people to think there is all of these coming on the pike. So if you have an inkling of some conduct that we might find to be a criminal antitrust violation, rush in and report it. This is a good first step for them, saying this is real, this is quick, it's a significant amount. There's not a deep nexus to the Postal Service. So they're doing all the things. But I still think the proof is still in the cases that they're able to bring based on whistleblower complaints. This is a deferred prosecution agreement. So a company agreed to pay an amount. A deferred prosecution agreement is thought to be lesser than a criminal plea agreement. It goes away after the 1-year period that's in this agreement if they do everything that they're bound to do by that agreement, the company. So this is a first step, but can they make and prove cases beyond a reasonable doubt relying on a whistleblower? That remains to be seen.
So if you're an employee out there and you're thinking, I may have seen something, I may have some inside information that could be a benefit, might be reward worthy, what should they be thinking about?
Well, as I thought would happen when I was here in July, I do think that there is a lot of clamoring of lawyers to provide that service. If you went Googling whistleblower, or maybe now you're using a AI bot, but you are looking at, I have information on antitrust, I want to blow the whistle, I'm sure you'd get a plethora of advertisements for lawyers that would be happy to help you and likely take a cut of that. So that development of that bar, like we've seen in the False Claims Act context, like we've seen in securities whistleblower context, that's happening. That's happened. They're out there looking for people. They're advertising, so people would look that up. They could go directly to the Antitrust Division, and I think the Antitrust Division wants to promote access from individuals, and there's a website that lays out what to do. People need to be realistic that the reward, like any reward, comes with a lot of requirements. They will have to cooperate. They will have to spend probably more time than they like working with agents and reviewing documents. And that reward is not guaranteed. There's a lot of discretion. There's a lot of exclusions to the program. So at the end of the day, will they get paid? Still, there's a lot of discretion to be had. It's not a guaranteed award just because you rush in.
And can people who work for the government or the Postal Service get an award under this program?
Unfortunately, no. There are exclusions that say that people are ineligible for an award if they're an official, employee, or contractor of the DOJ, the Postal Service, or any law enforcement agency. And their relatives also can't get it. So if they are doing their job and they see this type of conduct, sometimes we saw procurement officials, law enforcement, Office of Inspector General, they're doing their job. They shouldn't expect to get award or reward under this program. I think the idea is you do your job. That's what you're there to do. So no, they're not going to be able to get it. I'm sorry to tell your listeners.
I've been speaking with Ann O'Brien. She's a partner at Shepherd and co-leader of the firm's Antitrust and Competition Practice Group. Ann, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. It's really interesting to follow up the memo we talked about in July with this first case. Thanks for joining me. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.